Now, to unpack this growing divide between Israel's political leadership and its security institutions, and to understand the broader implications of the full Gaza occupation plan, we turn now to our expert, Khaled Dawood, who's joining us from Cairo, managing editor at Al Ahram Weekly. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. So, Khaled Dawood, how would you characterize the current political divide within Israel regarding the Gaza reoccupation plan?
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me. Again, we're only getting leaks and reports coming from the Israeli cabinet about the alleged divisions between the military leadership of the army, represented by the chief of staff, and the Israeli prime minister, who allegedly is under pressure from his extremist ministers, such as National Security Minister Ben Gvir and the Finance Minister Smotrich. But at the end of the day, after a meeting that was held yesterday for the cabinet and the briefing that Netanyahu received from his chief of staff, Zamir basically said that he will comply with whatever decisions taken by the political leadership. We've seen some attacks, some statements from Smotrich and Ben Gvir criticizing Zamir, some leaked reports about his possible resignation or that he's being pushed to resign. But nobody really knows what the truth is, including the reports that we've been reading increasingly about desire by Netanyahu to expand his military operation inside Gaza and to, as is being described in the media, a reoccupation of the entire Gaza Strip, which is, again, a very controversial issue, Mark, because at the end of the day, Israeli forces are currently present in almost 80% of the Gaza Strip. With a few population centers that are being left without major military operations, such as Gaza City or Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis, because Israelis believe that most of the prisoners held by Hamas are being kept there. So it's a very thorny operation on both levels, with internal divisions and internal protests taking place by the families of the prisoners on a daily basis, worrying rightly that an expansion of the military operation will basically lead to the death of their relatives, of their loved ones. So that's why they oppose this kind of operation. And at the same time, the human cost is going to be huge. I mean, already, as you mentioned, Israel is under a lot of international criticism because of using food as a weapon in its war and intentionally starving the Palestinian population, resulting in the deaths of dozens on a daily basis because of the lack of food. But if the Israeli army does actually get into densely populated Palestinian cities, such as Gaza City, the human death toll is going to be very high, and definitely this is going to add to the Israeli international isolation and criticism among many world countries, including some of Israel's closest allies, such as Britain, France, the United Kingdom, or Australia, all these nations, Canada, all these countries have usually supported Israel all the time. But even right now, even a country like Germany, which has a special relationship with Israel, cannot but recognize the extreme situation in Palestine in terms of starvation and in terms of human losses. So
Okay.
maybe some people would say this reports about a reoccupation of Gaza is trying to put pressure on Hamas, but at the same time, definitely Netanyahu feels encouraged by the U.S. President Donald Trump, who said recently that it's up to Israel to decide whether it wants to expand its operation or reoccupy Gaza.
Well, we're going to welcome another guest to our discussion now, Ihsan El-Khatib, who's joining us from Kentucky in the United States, political science professor. Welcome to the discussion. Israel's Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, has openly pushed back against full occupation plans that have been put forward by Benjamin Netanyahu. How significant would you say this kind of dissent is?
Thank you for inviting me. The dissent, this disagreement between the military and the politicians is not new. Throughout the war, there were disagreements, but by the end of the day, The military is subject to the politicians, and they will have to do what they are told. But yes, I mean, many observers say the same thing as the Israelis, former politicians, the former leaders, the security. They say pretty much the same thing. But those who are serving now, they have no choice but to do what the politicians tell them to do. So by the end of the day, if Netanyahu decides on full occupation, if the cabinet decides, then the military would have to follow. And what the big problem, I think, is that the U.S. told them basically do whatever you want because you bear the consequences, and you are a sovereign nation, and you make your own decisions. The U.S. advises, the U.S. suggests. Sometimes the U.S. is begging, but the Israelis, by the end of the day, are doing whatever they want. They're Israel 2.0. They have different calculation now, and they really don't care. I mean, the old Israel had a different dynamic from the Israel we have today. Therefore, you can expect anything. Rationality, I don't think, explains the conduct of this war. The Americans from the beginning said, don't get into Gaza. Gaza is a trap. Sinwar set a trap for you to become a pariah state, you'll suffer a lot of casualties. There'll be a lot of Palestinian casualties. It's a dense area. And then what's your end game? If you occupy Gaza, you'll have to be responsible for 2 million Gazas. Do you want to do that? But then Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they don't really care about that. They have biblical think. They think that occupation is good, that they want the land so bad, and they still think they can get rid of the Palestinians. And that kind of thinking is really the problem.
And coming to you, Khalid Dawood, given what Professor Al-Khatib was just saying, well, what do you think are the key military and strategic objectives behind this plan by Netanyahu? What is he thinking?
Well, definitely he's only thinking about increasing pressure on Hamas so that it would give in to the demands by the Israeli side that they would release all the Israeli prisoners without any confirmation or without any assurances from the Israeli side that they would end the war or that they would pull out the Israeli troops from Gaza Strip fully as the Israelis have been demanding. Of course, we've heard Netanyahu stating that any final settlement should include disarming Hamas and the deportation of its leaders. But so far, Hamas has totally rejected this request by the Israeli side and is counting on Arab and international pressure on the Israeli side and on the American side. We have to state it clearly that in the current situation over the past 6 months, U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are basically acting as one side. And of course, as both myself and the other speaker from Kentucky mentioned, that he got a green light from Trump yesterday when he said that Israel can do whatever it wants when it comes to the occupation of Gaza. And that's basically the green light that Mr. Trump has given Netanyahu since he became president in late January, basically allowing him to do whatever it wants, particularly when it comes to the Gaza Strip. I mean, of course, there were some restraints when it came to the Israeli strike against Iran, and that's what actually added to the conviction among many observers that it's only Trump who can tell Netanyahu to stop the war, because he was able to tell the Israelis to stop bombing Iran, and they asked him to return their airplanes to Israel in the mid-air while they were carrying out that operation. So definitely the United States has the leverage and the ability to put pressure on the Israeli side. But so far, what U.S. President Donald Trump seems to be concerned with primarily is finding out a new way to deliver aid to the Palestinian people, maybe increase the number of distribution points that are being run by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But that's really sounds so ironic, Mark, because on one hand, they want to increase the amount of food that's getting into Gaza to the Palestinian people, and at the same time giving a green light for Netanyahu to go on killing a tremendous number of Palestinians in case he goes ahead with the plan to reoccupy Gaza or to enter the densely populated areas, but which have not been subject of heavy fighting so far. So unfortunately, until we can see more pressure coming from within Israel and from within the United States, I don't think we're going to see any end soon to this war. We've already seen many dissenting voices within the United States itself, Democratic lawmakers signing letters to the U.S. president asking him to put an end to the war and to look for other means to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. But at the same time, we've seen the Speaker of the U.S. Senate, the Speaker of the House, Mr. Johnson, being in Israel and basically backing Israel fully and even backing the Israeli annexation of the West Bank, which is another major disaster, by saying that the West Bank and Gaza is God's promise to the Jewish people. So as long as you have people like Johnson and people like Steve Witkoff or even Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary, and others within the U.S. administration who back the Benjamin Netanyahu's government fully, I think it's going to be very difficult to see the Israelis budging to international pressure. But with the only exception right now, to be honest with you, Mark, is pressure coming from within Israel itself. We're seeing the families of the hostages or the intellectuals who have been signing petitions, reserve soldiers who are saying they're not going to serve in Gaza. As you've mentioned, the suicide numbers among the Israeli soldiers. So probably, I mean, if the Israeli internal pressure increases, I think this could change the equation. But otherwise, the U.S. side and the Israeli side are acting in total coordination.
Okay, well, let me bring in Professor Al-Khatib. Both of you have been saying that Israel can basically do whatever it wants. Khaled Dawood there saying that the U.S. could do something, Trump could do something, could put some pressure on. But around him, you have people like Rubio and others, and the Speaker of the House, who are very supportive of Netanyahu. How do you see things from your vantage point in the United States? Is there some kind of pressure that Trump could put on Netanyahu to get him to change his ways?
Of course, the U.S. has all the leverage over Israel. Israel cannot continue to exist without U.S. support. The reason there is an Israel is the U.S. support. Without Truman supporting the Zionist enterprise in Palestine and recognizing Israel and pushing for support of division of Palestine at the UN, there wouldn't be an Israel. So the U.S. support is critical. The Israelis can get away with things that they're getting away with without Israel. Who gets away with genocide? And while committing genocide gets millions of dollars and unlimited support from the superpower in the world. I mean, the U.S. has all the leverage, but the problem is that the United States, historically, and it continues to be true, looks at the region and sees the national interest, the U.S. national interest as Israel and the oil. And sometimes there is a tension between the achieving these goals. So they will lean on Israel. The U.S. would lean on Israel if the oil is at stake. But if the oil price is okay and they're flowing, then there is no concern. I mean, Palestinians are not important for the U.S. The Israelis can kill 500,000 Palestinians. U.S. national interest will not be affected. There is a Jewish lobby that pushes for unlimited Israel. Trump himself got $100 million donated to support his campaign by a Jewish Israeli, Miriam Abelson. Jewish donors are very important. Jewish Americans are very influential in Washington and in the media. Trump is vulnerable. He's connected to some scandal with Epstein. And the media wrote how Netanyahu tried to extort Clinton with the Lewinsky file. So he doesn't need to open a battle with this lobby. He doesn't see American interests at stake if the war continues. If Israel occupies Gaza, how does that affect U.S. national interests? It doesn't. That's the thinking. And from another point of view, that's the problem for Palestinians, is that Israelis have a free hand. Now, when, as you mentioned earlier, when it affects the American national interests, such as the war with Iran dragging on, affecting the oil price, threatening that the Iranian regime will collapse, and all kinds of problems that unleashed. Now, then Trump would get mad at Netanyahu and order him to stop. But with Gaza, occupying Gaza again, the reason Witkoff went to Israel, not because of the ceasefire, because of issues of reoccupation. It's the visuals that were banned. Starving people on TV don't look good. I mean, for Israel, and don't look good for the US. So basically the US is at the stage of managing the famine, managing the starvation, where it doesn't lead to bad visuals, indefensible, like that. And that's the real problem. And if the US were not the superpowers of the world, and it would have been a different picture. But the fact that unlimited power, unlimited support, and then very extreme government, new Israel, I mean, how many people, how many Israelis support killing all the Palestinians, deporting them? So it's a different, it's a pre-October 7 and post-October 7, completely different environment.
So, Professor El-Khatib, they're saying that the Palestinians aren't really important for America, and Trump does like, if he likes anything, he likes money coming from the Jewish lobby. Khaled Dawood, you mentioned there that the real problems for Netanyahu are coming from within. So how significant would you say the opposition from people like the Chief of Staff and also from the Israeli army is inside Israel?
Well, you see, Mr. Netanyahu has been acting like the victorious party since the end of the war against Iran. I mean, he now feels that he can do whatever he wants after weakening Iran, weakening Hezbollah, getting rid of the former Syrian regime of Bashar Assad. Right now, the only main obstacle that's staying in his way to claim total victory and hegemony over the region is the situation in Gaza and being able to impose his agenda, which is basically reoccupying Gaza, or at least reoccupying parts of Gaza along its border, whether with Egypt or with Israel itself. So, I mean, again, the internal pressure is key to the development of the war in Gaza. I mean, whether it's coming from the army, whether it's coming from former chiefs of staff who've been signing letters to the Israeli prime minister saying the priority should be the release of the Israeli prisoners. And also, we can see that even the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, has been making very strong statements against Netanyahu. And even like former Prime Minister Yehuda Barak, has even been calling for a civil disobedience in order to force Netanyahu to stop this war in Gaza and to save Israel. To be honest, I mean, we've been reading many articles by American newspapers starting by saying that they are Zionists, that they support Israel, but at the same time they recognize the amount of damage that's been done to Israel's reputation worldwide, and the change in the position of key Israeli allies, as I mentioned, such as Britain and France, who said that they will recognize a Palestinian state, and more countries are coming that way too. And not even beyond, Mark, beyond the recognition of the Palestinian state. I mean, in countries like Greece that are known as a major tourist destination for Israelis, the Israeli tourists are facing many problems, even boarding within the Greek ports or other places because of protests against the Israeli conduct of the war. We've seen the Netherlands basically banning Smotrich and Ben Gvir from entering their territories. So even though, I mean, of course, the support by the United States is very important, influential, Israel cannot live in this world only depending on its relationship with the United States. So internal pressure and fear over Israel's isolation might bring some change in the Israeli position. But of course, as long as Benjamin Netanyahu feels he has the blind support of the American side, it will be very difficult to bring him to stop this war, or at least to stop the daily killing of the Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip.
Yes, there has been very strong words from former ministers, prime ministers, and also military men as well, criticizing Netanyahu and his government. But Professor El-Khatib, the army is now reportedly reducing its forces due to soldier exhaustion and the problems that the Israeli soldiers are having. What does that reveal about the sustainability of a Gaza campaign that Netanyahu might like to embark on, like reoccupation?
They're willing to pay the price. There are all kinds of challenges, but they are willing to pay the price. It's been almost 2 years. Who imagined it's going to be 2 years? Who imagined that Israel would demolish this much of Gaza, would starve people, would deny the obvious that they're denying, they're starving people? And the U.S. has been on the same page, fortunately, with the Israelis, because from the beginning, the Israelis used food as a weapon. So they'll be discussing for a ceasefire deal, and then the Israelis will say, well, you release X number of hostages, and then Y number of uh, food trucks will enter, and a number of, let's say, of bakeries would work. Can you imagine that? And the Americans were okay with using food as a weapon, and even the number of bakeries operating. So this is not normal. We're not dealing with a normal situation. This is not a normal situation where you say, oh, well, logic, common sense. We'll go back to history and say, okay, Israel did this in the past and all that. These people don't care. I mean, logic and common sense do not carry the day. These people, I mean, Netanyahu said these people are the Amalek, and basically they want to wipe them. They say they want, there's a minister that went to the Aqsa, the mosque sanctuary compound, and they held prayers there. And then he's saying they want to build a temple there. So this is not normal. We're not living
And this
at a
is
time when, yeah.
against the actual policy of their own government, of Netanyahu's government. Going to
Yeah,
Al-Aqsa is against their own policy. How can they get away with the insubordination and doing basically whatever they want?
this is minister of the cabinet. I mean, say that he's the government. He's the he's responsible for the police. I mean, they have thousands of Jews enter the compound and pray there, and the only thing they're stopping is slaughtering animals in the compound. And he's stating that he wants to build this. You see, the whole thing of Gaza is connected to the Aqsa issue, because whenever the Israelis would tinker with the situation of the Aqsa, then the Palestinians from Gaza would respond by firing rockets. So the Israelis used October 7 as a pretext. Okay, we want to. This Zionist enterprise has been moving at a slow pace, steady but slow. But now they want to move it faster. They're becoming impatient. Let's get rid of the Palestinians. Let's have greater Israel. Let's get rid of all the Palestinians from Gaza. Let's take over the West Bank. Let's build a temple. They have reached a point where they think, oh, we don't have to wait anymore. We have the support of the U.S. and nobody can stop us. Who can stop us? So that's the problem, and this quantitatively, qualitatively different stage of the fight. And as long as this government is in power, bad things will happen. I mean, they bombed in Syria, they bombed here, they bombed there. Netanyahu brags about fighting 7 different countries. They say they want to partition Syria, and that the Syrian army is not allowed to reach so much. This is bizarre. It's not normal situation, and the world, most of the world, the Arab Muslims are on the side of international law, UN resolutions. But then the US charges, I mean, the International Criminal Court charges the Netanyahu with crimes, war crimes, and then the US goes after the International Criminal
Wow.
Court. So we have an unusual situation where it's really, I mean, one way to describe it is insane. And then the US gives the full support, and you can expect
Indeed.
anything from this kind of cabinet. So logic and common sense and cost and all that, I don't think that's really the benchmark.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for being part of our discussion here on Q News. Khaled Dawood and also Professor Ihsan El Khatib as well. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a fascinating discussion.